Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. As always, we thank you guys so much for being here. We're really excited to bring you guys our Quarterback Rankings 2.0. This was something we were really excited about from a day after we published our first Quarterback Rankings video, because honestly, back then there was a lot we didn't know, and I know we keep saying that, but so much happens in the offseason, it's crazy. Just the other day, Cam Chancellor announced his retirement, another surprising move in the offseason. But I feel like we're finally starting to reach a point in the offseason where we know what's going to happen, and we're really starting to get fairly secure rankings. So we're excited to bring you that. We're going to go through every player ranked in order and give you some in-depth information, better than our first video, but we're also going to tell you the tiers. I think the tier system is extremely important to the way that we do fantasy, especially in the draft. But before we get to that, let's talk about a few things. First is you should definitely check out our Instagram if you haven't already. I know I mention this in every video, but we're posting things there that we're not putting in the videos, and we're putting polls on there. That's a really interesting thing because we love your guys' comments. We love to hear from you, but if you want to take part of these polls, if you want to vote and have a voice on things that we're doing or opinions on players, things like that, polls are a really great way to do it. So that's Instagram is where we're doing it. Of course, another thing is if you guys are looking for a fantasy football draft board kit, check out our link down in the description below. Selling great draft board kits through the Fantasy Football Bros, or the Fantasy Bros, excuse me. Wonderful kits. I believe they're even reusable, but we'll talk a bit more about that. And I said in our last video, we're going to make a video here soon and kind of give you guys all the information on that, but we really wanted to start getting to our 2.0 or a better ranking, so we had to push that off. And then finally, we've been contemplating, we love fantasy, we can't play in enough fantasy leagues, that's for sure, so we maybe thought this might be a year to add another league. If you guys want to play in a fantasy football league with us, let us know. We have to make sure that we're going to get enough numbers to make this a viable league. A 6-team league is just lame, it's no fun. We want to have 12 at least, 10, 12, even 16. I prefer to have tons of teams. So let us know in the comments if you would be open to that idea so we can just get an idea of who would want to do that. But now we'll get right into it. We'll get started. First, Rob, what is the general philosophy? Why do we do tiers?
Yeah, well, I wasn't prepared to get into it too much, but tiers have to do with basically your draft approach. The reason why you tier players, obviously you have your definitive rankings, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, for example. But if you're sitting there and you're looking at, okay, do I take a running back? Do I take a wide receiver? You begin to look at your strategy. Your tier system will help you develop, okay, yeah, maybe my next ranked player out there is a quarterback, but there's 5 or 6 that fall into that tier, meaning that there's going to be not much difference statistically between maybe 4 or 5 guys. Then I maybe will go into another position with the idea that, okay, when it comes back around to me, that there'll still be players available on that tier, so I can still get a quality player and then maybe work on a different position. So tiers help you not necessarily change the way you look at the individual positions, but how you approach the draft. So I hope that makes sense. We're going to actually get into that a lot more. We're going to do a video on some of the biggest mistakes people make in fantasy football and during drafts, and we'll get into great detail about that during that video.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's extremely important. You can never predict what's going to happen in your draft. You just can't. Randomly, you'll see quarterback runs. We were in a draft one time, and we were seeing quarterback runs, teams taking like their second and their third quarterbacks before they had shored up their starting wide receivers. Of course, that wasn't the most competitive league we've ever been in, but that's exactly why we do our tiers. It's to help give us kind of a safe, secure structure that can allow us to fall back on it when things get a little bit crazy, especially when you're in leagues and you with people you're not so used to and you don't know what they're going to do. But we'll get more into each tier and what it means in a minute. Let's just get right into our first tier then. All right, so our tier 1 here is quarterbacks 1 through 6. This is a fairly small tier, not the smallest quarterback tier we have, but these are probably the best tier, obviously. But the guys that if you're going to reach for a quarterback, reach. We're going to tell you guys to wait. We don't want anyone taking a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. We don't do it. But if you're in round 4 and these guys are out there, it'd be really hard to pass on them. It just is.
Yeah, tier 1 guys are guys that are studs. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, they will produce. Barring any unforeseen injury or something totally unexpected, these are guys that are near the top. They are studs, and they're going to produce, and you can trust beyond a shadow of doubt their productivity. So that's kind of where tier 1 lands. So.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely no concerns with these guys. Let's get into it. Our number 1 overall guy that we definitely completely agree on is Aaron Rodgers. Why is he number 1?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a lot of guys saying for some of you this information will be redundant. We've talked about in other videos, but for those that have never seen this before, we're going to share information in case you haven't heard this. So there's a lot of reasons why Aaron Rodgers for me is number one. To me, it's a no-brainer. Don't even think about anybody else above Aaron Rodgers. I know some are tempted right now to look at, the Houston quarterback. We're looking
And
at
Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson, thank you. And Deshaun Watson, right now his average draft position, number 2, right behind him. But you got to go with Aaron Rodgers. He's the safest, best quarterback out there. Now, last year, he was on pace to have 43 passes before he broke his collarbone against the Vikings. And now, if you look at the stats, it says he played 7 games, but in reality, he only played 6 because he hurt himself early in the Vikings game there. He only played 6 full games. Now, his overall quarterback, if you look around the history in the NFL, he's the only quarterback who has a career quarterback rating of over 100. That's impressive. This guy has been a stud. In fact, if you look at it, 8 of 11 seasons he has a quarterback rating of over 100. If you look at statistical per game averages, extrapolate over 16 games, he averages 38 touchdown passes per season. Okay, if you look at that stats projected out, it's really quite phenomenal. Then you know about this guy too. A lot of the guys are this way, but Aaron Rodgers is known to be extremely, extremely competitive. He works very hard, not only in the season, but in the offseason to keep himself at the top of his game. Right now, there's nothing that tells me that's going to change. I think that's something that bodes really well for him this year too, and the reason why I think that he's going to be near the top is the Packers didn't do a lot to improve that defense in the offseason. Last year, they were 26th in the NFL in points allowed on defense. And so they didn't do a lot to change that defense. They're going to need to score a lot of points to win games. They're going to have to rely a lot on Aaron Rodgers' arm to win games there. Now, some people might be concerned that Jordy Nelson left. I'm not worried about it. Jordy Nelson at 33 years old, coming off a knee surgery, some other things. He was declining. He's got great weapons around him with Ty Montgomery. You've got Williams, Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, Jimmy Graham. So I think he's got enough weapons around him. He's going to be just fine there. And so everything points to him another huge year this year. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I like what you said. That career quarterback rating of 103.8 is, I believe, like 4 overall better than the next guy. The next best is like 99.8. I think that's Russell Wilson. So really hands down better than everyone else as far as quarterback rating. But another thing that I really like, the one thing that can sometimes limit fantasy quarterbacks from being better is playing on a team with an effective running game. Because a lot of times those teams with good running backs can get into the red zone and then they can just ground and pound and punch it in real hard and physical. I like that they don't have an unbelievably effective running game, although I think that Aaron Jones could be a solid pick this season. But what I really like is that last year, Devontae Adams was first in the NFL for red zone targets, and Jimmy Graham, the tight end they just acquired, was third for red zone targets. So 2 of the top 3 guys in red zone targets Aaron Rodgers has. Last year they combined for 49 targets, 31 catches, and 16 touchdowns in the red zone. Those numbers are huge. That's definitely going to help him stay above a lot of these other guys. I think he's easily the number 1 quarterback.
Yeah, so it's Aaron Rodgers. So for us, let's get to number 2. And for me, number 2, I don't know where you stand with this one, but it's got to be Russell Wilson. Now, 2 of the last 3 years, Russell Wilson threw for 34 touchdown passes. Now, in 2016, he did struggle a bit that year. Why did he struggle? Well, it came down to obviously and clearly offensive line play there. Their offensive line struggled. He was beat up. He had a nagging leg injury and ankle injuries, and that kind of hurt him a little bit. Now, last year before the season started, we went out publicly and we said he's going to rebound. He's going to be just fine, and he did. He had a good season. So that's a bonus. Now, when you look at his legs, compare, for example, him to Cam Newton. Cam Newton's going to bring you more in terms of rushing touchdowns, things like that. But Russell Wilson overall just a more polished quarterback. He can throw the ball more effectively. I think in terms of that, another thing that bodes well, we just talked about this with Aaron Rodgers, but another thing I like about Russell Wilson is that Seattle's defense right now took a huge step back this year, and I think they're going to have to win a lot of games throwing the ball, maybe 40, 45 times a game. They lost Richardson, Sherman, Sheed, Chancellor. I know they lost a number of other guys on defense. That defense, which was always in the top 10, definitely in the top 5 at times, is going to fall out of the top 10, maybe in the top 15, which is going to require them to throw the ball a lot there. The weapons they have, no, if I have any concerns for Baltimore, I think he's very talented. I think he's very poised. He's a great quarterback overall. He's number 2 guy that we have. I wish he had better weapons. I like Baldwin. I think Baldwin's good. He's got Jerron Brown, Ed Dixon, Tyler Lockett. So he doesn't have great weapons around him. Although I will say this about Tyler Lockett. When he came in his rookie year, he showed a lot of potential. A lot of people thought this was a guy that was going to have a great career. And then he struggled the next couple years. But a lot of that was a nagging injuries that he had. And this is the first offseason where he's totally healthy. So this could be a year that he kind of blossoms into a very good number 2 guy. But they do have McKissick and they have Penny at running back there. And they're solid receiving options come out of the backfield. So for right now, I've got my number 2 quarterback being Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think definitely the best thing that bodes for him is the loss of Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett, Sheldon Richardson, Deshaun Sheed, and Cam Chancellor. I can't remember the last time a defense lost so many key players. That's crazy. I'm not really sure what they're going to do as far as their defense. But like you said, they lost Paul Richardson and Jimmy Graham. Last year they combined for 178 targets and 16 touchdowns. The question is, who's going to step up and take that? I'm not really sure. It's kind of a weird thing with Russell Wilson because he's so talented. He's been so good for years, and that defense and that rest of that team requires him to be so good. But then there's no one there to help him. I guess on the bright side, he's an extremely mobile quarterback, and he's got a couple of running backs now that can catch out of the backfield. We just talked about Doug Baldwin recently, and his ability to perform against really good cornerbacks is also huge, considering their schedule can be kind of tough. But yeah, number 2 easily for me. I think just pure opportunity and just massive times he's going to be able to throw the ball all season.
Yeah, 2016 when he took that step back, his mobility with that ankle and leg injuries that he had hurt his mobility, and I think that's ultimately what hurt him. But if the offensive line can hold up this year, he's going to find ways to get the ball downfield to his wide receivers there. I like Russell Wilson with that bad defense at number 2. Number 3 for me, this is a tough one, but Tom Brady, I've got at number 3. He's getting older, and he's going to decline at some point, but I don't think this is going to be the year. Now, we had a video, it was called the Fact or Fiction video, and in there we kind of talked about if he's going to have a step back, how he's going to do, and we got into some really deep statistics, and we kind of broke it down even more than we're about to in the video. So if you want to know why I think that he's going to have another good year this year, go to our Fact or Fiction video, and we'll really begin to break that down deeply. So right now, look at Tom Brady at number 3. Age really hasn't slowed him. In fact, if you look at, he's had 3 consecutive years where he's had a quarterback rating of over 100. If you look at the previous 15 seasons combined, he only had 3. So he's had 3 the last 3 years. Before that, he had 15 seasons. He had only 3. So he's had 6 total his career. So he's phenomenal there. Looks like you're gonna add something.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was just for fun, for whatever reason, I was watching the NFL Top 100. They rank every player going into the season, and Tom Brady was ranked number 1. I can't remember who it was, but they said, I think Tom Brady has Benjamin Button's disease. He gets better every year, even though he's getting older, which is funny. His last 3 seasons, he's had a better quarterback rating than he's had the rest of his career, which is strange. I definitely think that he's a top-tier quarterback, but I have to bump him down a few slots more towards the bottom of Tier 1, because I do have a few concerns. Edelman's gone for 4 games. Gronkowski has injury problems. They lose Dion Lewis. They lose Nate Soldier. But you're absolutely right in saying that age has not been a problem for him. If I have any concerns with him, it's not his age, it's not his production, it's just that he's got some shaky weapons around him, although it's kind of always been that way for his entire career, though, so I guess that's not as big as a concern as it might be for other quarterbacks.
Yeah, this guy is fanatical about taking care of his body. If you take a look at one, he's got his diet, he's very fanatical about that. In fact, he hires a chef that prepares all of his meals. His exercise habit is very unorthodox in terms of how he exercises and what he does. Keep himself in very good shape, very low impact exercise. He takes a very different approach to his body and his care there. He even does exercises for his brain. We talk about that in our Fact or Fiction video. This guy is fanatical about how he approaches healthcare and how he approaches his body, body, soul, and mind, the whole thing for him. He really works hard on that. In fact, if you look at it, besides 2008 when he tore his ACL, he's only missed 5 total games, the other 17 seasons combined. He's been a relatively healthy quarterback. He's avoided a lot of serious injuries. Now, he does have a loss, like you mentioned, of Amendola, Lewis, Cook. That's going to hurt a bit. He does get Edelman back right now. Now, he's suspended for 4 games, but it sounds to me like Edelman's team, he's put together a team to fight the suspension. And right now, it looks like they feel like there's a pretty decent chance he's going to at least get that reduced or maybe overturned altogether. But right now, he'll be out for 4 games. He does have Hogan, Gronk, Matthews, Cordell Patterson, Burkhead, White, and Kenny Britt, and they like to spread the ball around there. So, I think some of those guys will step up a little bit. He's going to see a drop-off eventually, but I think we're going to see one more good year. Of course, if you're in a dynasty league, that's going to drop his values considerably. We're talking about just kind of overall standard drafts right now at this point. But I don't see any signs of decline. In fact, only 4 months ago, this guy goes out against a very, very good Philadelphia defense and throws for 505 yards, 3 TDs, and no interceptions. I couldn't believe after the Super Bowl was over, this guy, let's say that again, 505 passing yards, 3 TDs, no interceptions, and I actually heard a commentator blaming Brady for the Super Bowl loss. I don't even know what to say. That's ridiculous. This guy was phenomenal in that game. If you look, he's a guy that's had 30-plus touchdown passes 6 of the last 8 years. Now, in 1 year there, he didn't. That was in 2016. But in 2016, he was suspended for 4 games. He ended up with 28 touchdown passes. If he plays those 4 games, he ends up over 30, which means 7 of the last 8 years He has 30 touchdown passes. This guy is doing great, obviously. So I know there are question marks. I know it's scary at this point, but I think Tom Brady, people are going to be spooked by him. I've got him ranked number 3, but I think he'll fall down a little bit farther. I'd be happy to take him maybe 6 or 7 around there, because that's where I see him falling in most leagues. But he's a guy that I think for one more year you can trust him. Anything you want to add to that?
I really like the thing that you said at the end there, for one more year. We're going to take this 1 year at a time. He's not a great dynasty quarterback, but for this year, things are looking bright. But again, this is fantasy. We're going to take things 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 year at a time. Let's not try to look too far ahead. This year, he's a great quarterback, easily in the first tier.
All right. So another guy we got in tier 1, a guy that I like, is Carson Wentz. Last year he was on pace for 41 touchdown passes, and he would have won the league's MVP undoubtedly until he tore his ACL. That season wasn't a fluke. I know a lot of people are coming out and they're saying this guy was a fluke, but he did really well his rookie year. He came out his rookie year and looked great then too. This guy is not a fluke. This former first-round pick is very poised, talented. He's got no deficiencies in his game. He's got very solid weapons around him. You look at Mike Wallace, Nelson Aguilar, you got Ertz, Ajay, you've got Clement. So this guy's got a lot of good weapons around him. Really, the only question mark for me right now is his recovery from his ACL surgery. And everything looks like he's going to be ready for week 1, although all reports indicate that he's not going to play in the preseason. They're going to keep him safe there. So he might be rusty the first week. We'll have to see. That's a little bit concerning. Now, he did come out publicly. You wonder, like, how is that going to affect his game? He was a guy that maybe didn't run for a lot of yards, but he was elusive in the pocket and, allowed him to, step up, miss defenders, get the ball downfield to some of his wide receivers because of his ability to move up in the pocket. Is that going to change how he plays with that injury? And he came out publicly and said he's not going to change his approach to the game at all and how he plays it one bit. I think this guy's going to be a perennial all-pro. I like Carson Wentz. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he's got great character. There's nothing about this guy that I don't like.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He came out his rookie year and had a quarterback rating of 79.3. That's really not bad for a rookie. They limited how much he was able to throw, and because of it, he had only 16 touchdowns, and then he had 14 interceptions. Not a bad rookie year, but not great. But then it was just shocked me how he basically doubled his touchdowns from 16 to 33, despite only playing 13 games. And he cut his interceptions in half to only 7. I mean, he looked so impressive. He had a quarterback rating of 101.9. What you said was perfectly right. He should have won MVP, even despite the 3 games he missed. Had he played those extra 3 games, he definitely would have won. I think he was the best quarterback all year last year. Just the way that he was able to do things and run that offense so well. I think it helps him that they've got some running backs in there now. Jay Ajayi, I think that's going to help him, keep some pressure off of him. But maybe that'll limit him. I definitely don't think so. He's been so effective last year, and he's got the same receiving core, same tight end, great options there.
Yeah, his rookie year, he wasn't phenomenal. His numbers weren't great necessarily. They didn't jump off the page at you. But I think if you break it down, if you actually get into his game logs, you'll look at his second half of the year was much better than his first half. So what he did last year, you could see indication of that his rookie year. It just took him a while, I think, probably to get adjusted to the NFL and figure some things out a bit. But really like Carson Wentz there in the tier 1. The other guy we have in tier 1 is Drew Brees. He's another guy a little bit younger than Tom Brady, but he's another guy like Tom Brady that hasn't slowed with age. In fact, he's another guy that's had 3 consecutive years with a QBR of over 100. He's only missed 3 games since 2003, a little bit younger than Tom Brady, so that's good. That bodes well for him. Now, I think what's going to happen is that the Saints are going to try to run the ball a lot with the success they had last year. Some ways that can hurt him statistically, but in a lot of ways that can help him because what's going to do is that play action, that running the game creates, and it's going to keep defenses honest in terms of ability to put pressure on him. So I like the fact they can run the ball. I think that's going to help him in play action. It's going to keep defenses from teeing up on Drew Brees there. So we saw that positive impact the running game had last year, not just in the ability not to get to him as much and their inability to tee off on him, but he had a career best 72% completion rate last year. It says a lot about where he's at, where that offense is at. I think another thing that's going to help him this year. Now, he did see a dip in his touchdown passes. Some of it, like I said, goes back to how well they ran the ball. If you look at Ingram and Kamara last year, they combined for 25 touchdowns, 139 catches, 3,094 combined yards between the two of them. But I've got to imagine that defensive coordinators going into 2018 are going to try to shut some of that running game down. Plus, Mark Ingram's going to be out for 4 games now, which I think is going to see a bump. I think that Drew Brees will back into the 30-touchdown realm as far as passes go. So
I completely agree with you. I think especially with the way that Alvin Kamara is, he's a very fast back. He's very agile, very good receiving back. But he's not a physical runner. He's just not. And I think the defense is going to be able to figure that out, especially the 4 games that Ingram is gone. That should give Drew Brees a big boost. Of course, Cameron Meredith being there is huge. Really, last year, besides Michael Thomas, who did he have that impressed us to throw the ball to? Kamara on the backfield, but as far as wide receivers, it was just Michael Thomas. So I think having Cameron Meredith helps a lot. He definitely could have a great season, a much more improved year. Don't be freaked out or panic because last year was a bit of an off year. It's true. Guys have to fluctuate a little bit, and I think he fluctuated down last year, but he's going to bounce right back up to where he's been for the past 5-10 years.
Yeah, he's had 9 times in his career he's thrown over 30 touchdown passes, and all of them been with the Saints. I think this is the 10th year he's going to do that. Last year he saw a dip in fantasy value, but he actually was a very, very effective quarterback. 72% completion rate is unbelievable. I think he has good weapons around him, like you mentioned. So he's a guy for me that tier 1, he's safe. You can trust him. He's going to have a good year. Don't worry about him. Anything you want to add before we move on to the final guy?
No, I got nothing. Let's just talk about Ben Roethlisberger, the final guy in the first tier.
Yeah, so a lot of you people are not going to agree with this pick, and I'm okay with that. A lot of people didn't agree with us when we said stay away from Matt Ryan last year. We were right. A lot of people didn't agree with us when we said stay away from Cam Newton in 2016 after his MVP season the year before, and we were right. So I'm going to go out here on a limb like this. Right now, his average draft position for Ben Roethlisberger in a lot of leagues, he's going somewhere about 14th or 15th quarterback taken. I cannot believe this. What are you people thinking? This is a major, major mistake, okay? Right now, his average draft position, like I said, is a 15th quarterback taken. That's insanely low. He's been overlooked in many drafts, and I think the reason why is we live in a society where people are always looking for the flavor of the week, the new greatest thing. They get enamored with young quarterbacks like Goff and Watson, Mahomes, things like that, and they overlook veterans who are proven that you can trust. People don't realize that since 2012, the last 6 seasons, right, you take Ben's per game statistical average and you project that over 16 games, right, he's averaging 31 touchdown passes per year. The last 4 seasons, he's averaging 298 passing yards per game. He's 2 yards shy of averaging 300 passing yards per game. That's great, especially if you get the bonus. Now you add on, he's got Juju Smith-Schuster, a 21-year-old stud wide receiver, and one of the greatest receiving backs of all time in Le'Veon Bell, and a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Antonio Brown. There's no reason why this guy doesn't end up with 20 to 32 touchdown passes. And if everything goes well and he can stay healthy, this might be his best career year yet. What are your thoughts on Ben?
I completely agree with you. Another thing to add to that, it's like I mentioned with Aaron Rodgers about quarterbacks needing to be effective in the red zone to be one of these elite fantasy quarterbacks. And I think a lot of people think, well, he might throw the ball less in the red zone because of Le'Veon Bell. That couldn't be more wrong, actually. He finished second in red zone passing attempts. He threw the ball 89 times last year in the red zone. Now, he has the weapons for it, and Le'Veon Bell had 85 receptions last year, on top of Antonio Brown, probably the best receiver in the league, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, I hate to compare, one group receiving core to another, and try to make all these tough comparisons, because it's just too hard to tell. But he hands down has the best weapons in the NFL. I really don't think that it's even close to arguable. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, fantastic weapons. Again, I think that those red zone targets help a lot for his fantasy value. I wouldn't be surprised if he threw 32 touchdowns this season.
Yeah, I think I feel bad. Ryan Shazier going down last year. That defense really struggled down the stretch with him out of there, and he's obviously not going to play this year. So the first half of the year, the Pittsburgh defense looked like they were going to be a top defense, and then second half they're totally different. They were Jekyll and Hyde. I think that defense might take a step back, which means they're going to have to throw the ball and be more productive offense to win games. We'll see about that, but.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to get to Tier 2. What's the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2? Before we get to that, well, one, for me, here's the difference. I'll use Watson as an example. So a lot of people are really huge on Watson, quarterback for Houston. A lot of them have him as Tier 1, and we know that because of his average draft position right now. He's the second quarterback taken, only behind Aaron Rodgers. So for me, Tier 1 quarterbacks are picks that, barring a catastrophe, a unforeseen injury, that you can beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, let me say that again. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, trust these guys that they will produce, and they are extremely, extremely dependable. With that said, I like Watson. I think that guy's a stud. I think he's very talented. But he's only started 6 games in his career, and he's coming off an ACL surgery. Couldn't I say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I can trust that he's a Tier 1 guy? I just can't say that. There's just a few question marks. I'm not saying I don't like that guy, but ACL surgery and only 6 games started, I can't say beyond a shadow of a doubt you can depend upon him without any hesitation. So that's kind of how I differentiate Tier 1 to Tier 2. Beyond a shadow of one, Tier 1 guys you can trust. Tier 2, there are a few question marks there. Let's get to our Tier 2. Anything you want to add to that, Christian?
Yeah, I really like what you said about that. Tier 2, I think that Tier 2 is the biggest reason that we wait on quarterbacks. because tier 1's fairly small and tier 2 is actually fairly large. You can see our tier 2 goes through our rank 7 through 14. So basically, you should be able to get a top 2 tier guy, a guy in the first 2 tiers, without having to reach. And I think that's huge. That's one of the things that really plays into our ability to do that, because these guys are very talented. These guys show a lot of signs that they could be tier 1. These guys have shown very good fantasy seasons. There's just 1 or 2 things, small things, that keep them out of being tier 1. And so I think that's the big reason that we always say wait on these quarterbacks. But let's quit talking about tiers and just talk about these guys specifically. Deshaun Watson, what do you think about him? I know he's very controversial at this point. Everyone seems to be hit or miss on him. Either they love him or they hate him. They think he's going to be awesome or they're afraid of him.
Yeah, I think right now most people love this guy, I think, too much. And I'll get to why. Once again, that's not. I think he's very talented, but I have some certainly concerns there. But let's go back to last year. It took him a few games to learn that offense. He didn't get a lot of first-team reps in the preseason. They went to Savage. So once they finally moved and brought him as a starter, it took about 3 games for him to kind of learn the offense, kind of figure some things out. And then he kind of found his groove. And he had a 4-game stretch before his ACL injury. His quarterback rating was, during those games, respectively, 125, 120, and 103 and 107. So he was phenomenal. During that same 4-game stretch, he had 16 touchdowns with 1 rushing touchdown. That would have gave him, he was on pace just during that 4-game stretch for 64 touchdown passes. But just not even looking, let's just look at the 7-game totals he had and project that out. Just from the 7-game totals, he was on pace for 43 touchdown passes. No matter what stat you use, the 4-game stretch, the 7 games, doesn't matter. This guy was on pace to have a very, very good year. With that said, I expect a good year from him. I think he's going to have a very distinguished career. But don't get too caught up in the hype. Okay, I think there's a concern. I'm going to go out there and say this. I don't think he's going to have top 5 in quarterback scoring this year. You mark my words, if I'm wrong, feel free to rub it in my face at the end of the season. But I think he's going to take a slight step backwards, and here's why. 1, defense are going to have game film and time to prepare for him and adjust. 2, he's recovering from ACL surgery, and even though his recovery is going very well, it's got to affect him slightly. It's just going to have some effect on him. But here's another reason why I expect a drop off this year for him, and this was huge when I looked into this. Last year, his numbers were helped by a very bad Houston defense. Okay, the Texans had to throw the ball all the time. They were always playing from behind. There's a lot of garbage time statistics there. They were worse in the NFL, allowing 27.3 points per game. And that was against offenses like the Jags, Colts, and Titans for a total of 6 games. And those are some bad offenses. This defense was brutally bad. That defense can't get any worse. They're going to improve. In fact, in the offseason, they brought in some guys, and they brought in Matthew. They brought in Colvin. They brought in Reed in the secondary. They're going to have a healthy J.J. Watt back. You add him to Merciless and Clowney. There's no way that defense doesn't get better. They're not going to need to throw the ball as many times as they do. That in itself is going to simply hurt his statistics. So those are my take on it. I think he's athletic. I think he's strong arm. I think he's got great wideouts. He can run. There's nothing about this guy that I don't like, but I don't think that I can call him a tier 1 quarterback just yet. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think there's 2 things that's extremely important not to undervalue or to underestimate or to forget about, so to speak, would be, first of all, rookie quarterbacks that have good legs, which Deshaun Watson was a very good running quarterback last year, can really surprise some teams. Colin Kaepernick for a while was very good running. Cam Newton his rookie year still is, but not quite like he was his rookie year. RG3. I mean, the list goes on and on of people who come out and are extremely effective with their legs. But you know what happens? With every single one of those guys, the very next year, or even after just a couple of weeks, defenses figure them out and they slow them down. Cam Newton came out his rookie year, ran for 14 touchdowns. His sophomore year, cut that basically in half to 8. So with the leg injury and the fact that teams are going to figure out how he's able to run and how to stop him when he does that, I think we're going to see a major regression in his ability to move the chains through running, to get rushing touchdowns, and to do things like that. And then, of course, like you said, that defense can only get better. They added Tyrann Mathieu. J.J. Watt should be healthy. He only played basically 4.5 games last year. And so I think those are 2 things that are extremely important not to underestimate.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him at the end of the year at maybe 24 to 25 touchdown passes with maybe 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns, which is a very good year, by the way, but it's not in the top 5. So
exactly.
All right. Anybody else? Should we move on to our next guy?
Yeah, we probably should.
Okay, let's talk about Andrew Luck. So last 3 years, his per game average divided over 16 games, turns out he's been averaging over 30 touchdown passes per season. He had 1 year there where he had 40 touchdown passes, which is very, very good, by the way. We talked about this before. That season, you can look and get pretty excited that he had 40 touchdown passes. We have shared this statistic before, but there was a company that uses Sabermetrics. There was a study they took that year, and they looked at every throw that every quarterback had made in the NFL, and they looked at all the balls that should have been interceptions but weren't because either penalties or they were drops by the defenders or where the wide receiver had to become a defender and knock the ball away. And what they found that year is that Andrew Luck should have led the league in interceptions. So I'm not taking anything away from the guy, but you have to be a little bit careful when you get caught up in those numbers quite a bit there. Another concern for him is his health. Last year, they said he was going to play all year, and he had missed the entire season. It looked like that was going to happen again, although as of now, he started throwing the football. He's reporting no pain in his shoulders, so things would seem to be pointing to him playing this year. Now, I've got some more stuff in there, but anything you want to add into that before I get back into my notes?
Well, I don't know if we really have to talk about him too much, guys. It's very simple. He just started throwing a football again for the first time in like 550 days or whatever it was, and he had to throw an extra light football. He says the pain's gone, but it feels like last year. I'll say this, he's a talented quarterback. He's a 30-touchdown quarterback when he's healthy, but it's going to take him a long time to get back to be the Andrew Luck that we know. Andrew Luck is a guy that I would draft and stash on my bench in a keeper or a dynasty league because then I could keep him in the offseason going into next year. But if you honestly expect him to come out and be the 32 touchdown, 40 touchdown guy that he's been in the past, there's really nothing that says it's going to happen. He's still recovering. Like I said, the big thing was everyone's like, well, he's throwing a football again. Well, he's throwing an extra light football, and he claims the pain is gone, but he still hasn't really thrown it. He hasn't been out there with the first-string guys practicing a ton, so that's a guy where he definitely has 8 overall talent, but are you going to draft him at 8 overall expecting him to be your starting fantasy quarterback this year? Well, I don't think so.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do that because I just don't take my quarterbacks early. Anyways, I don't risk it. So he's going to be long gone before I probably take mine anyways, and I'm going to build up my bench or I'm going to build up my running backs or wide receivers. So a little more thoughts on Andrew Luck. When you look at who he is as a quarterback, you're right. This guy, one, he can run. He's surprisingly mobile. People don't realize that. He's got a very good understanding of the game. He's gifted. He has a strong arm when it's healthy. It's a big question mark there. He's a prototypical quarterback. He's very talented. I think it also helped that they added Eric Ebron to that. And the reason why it's important, now he's got Doyle and Ebron there. As far as targeting tight ends go, Luck, percentage-wise, targets his tight ends more than any other quarterback in the NFL. He likes to use that. Another thing that bodes well for him is that defense isn't good. Last year, the Colts were 30th in the league in points allowed with 25.3 points allowed per game. So he's another quarterback that may benefit by the fact that they're going to have to throw the ball maybe 40 to 50 times just to stay in a lot of games there. Concerns I have, one, the injury. That's a huge concern. Two, I like Hilton, but other than that, he doesn't have a lot of great wide receivers on that team. He needs to get some other weapons. One thing that did bode well in terms of his health, because we're trying to look through this, make sense of what's going on. Coach says he's fine, but they said that last year he wasn't fine. Can we trust him at this point? But in the draft this year, they actually traded down and passed up on drafting a quarterback. So that tells you they trust that he's going to be the quarterback of the future. Question is, will it be this year or is it next year? So he's a high risk and high reward draft pick at this point. So
exactly, that's solid. Well, now we should move on. Let's talk about Cam Newton. This is a kind of interesting, but also kind of boring. There's not a whole lot to say about Cam Newton. I guess I'll let you get started, and then I can add whatever you don't want to talk about. But
okay, yeah. So Cam Newton, after his MVP season in 2015, a lot of people got excited. He was sometimes the number 1 overall pick in a lot of fantasy drafts. We said, here's in fact, this is taken from our notes that year going into the fall of 2016. Here's what we said. We said, buyer beware. Before you expect him to repeat those numbers, 2015 was an aberration. And besides 2015, he's never had a quarterback rating over 88, and the most touchdown passes he had prior to that year was 24, and that was with Steve Smith at times. Besides his 2015 season, the other 6 seasons, he's only averaged 20.5 TD passes per season versus 14 interceptions. And here's kind of really where I kind of put this guy. He's a great football player. He's a great athlete, but he's not a great quarterback. The reason why he's still considered a top 10 fantasy option is his legs. Honestly, that's it. If you take a look at where he's at his legs wise, what keeps him in the top 10? He's averaged 8 rushing touchdowns per season with 670 rushing yards per season since coming to the league. He's a big physical back. Now, the concern that I have is he's big and physical at 6'5", 245. Some reports say he's even bigger than that. That's a tough matchup for cornerback and linebackers out there. He's so physical, but it's also taking its toll on his body. You can begin to see last couple seasons, injuries are starting to pile up. He's starting to get wore down. There's only so much you can take that sort of abuse out there. But it's hard to deny just how athletic he is. So that's kind of where I look at him. What are your thoughts on Cam?
I completely agree with you. One thing is, I would love to see this guy go to a team with some weapons and have some real wideouts for him to throw to, because I actually think he's got a fairly good arm. I think it's underestimated, but just the situation he is in is kind of awful. When your best guy, you got Devin Funchess and an aged Greg Olsen who's kind of banged up. I mean, really, honestly, his best receiver is Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, which is, one of those check down options, screen guys. He's not a true wide receiver. Of course, he is a running back. Don't forget, he's going to get you 5 or 6 touchdowns every year at the least. And so when you're kind of estimating, looking at these guys, he bumps up because of that. But yeah, you're right. It's something about, I just don't like the fact that he leans so much on that. But you got to put him around that 10 range simply because of his ability to run. That keeps him in so many games, keeps him in higher up in the rankings because of it. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but yeah, that's probably right where I'd put him.
Okay. So number 10 is Matthew Stafford, a guy that's, I think, been overlooked in a lot of leagues. He's averaged 28 touchdown passes per season since his second season. He had a big year in 2011 where he had 41 touchdown passes. I think he's underrated by most people. He's got good weapons around him with Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, and Kenny Golladay, who, by the way, is a very talented young wide receiver. I think it's also a bonus he plays indoors, so that come those winter months when weather gets bad, he'll be playing indoors. That helps quite a bit. He's cut down his interceptions significantly since 2013. Last year, his best quarterback rating, just missing 100. He finished with 99.3. At the age of 30 in quarterback terms is still pretty young, so he's going to be fine there age-wise. I also think that his numbers could be aided by the fact the Lions defense is near the bottom third of the league in points allowed last year, and they have a below-average running game, so everything points to, I think, Matthew Stafford having a quiet but a very good fantasy season.
Yeah, he averages 1.76 touchdowns per game over 16 games, which comes out to 28 touchdowns since 2010, like you mentioned. I think he has a really underrated wide receiving core. I'm a huge fan of Kenny Golladay. I wouldn't be surprised if he came out this year and shocked some people as the number 1 receiver in Detroit. I really like him. Theo Riddick out of the backfield had like 500 receiving yards last year, so that's really huge too. I like that defense is bad, that running game is ineffective. I think a lot of things bode really well for Matthew Stafford to come out and do what he's done his entire career and be a 30-touchdown guy. I don't necessarily know if he's going to explode this year. I don't think he's going to step back, but 28 to 30, 31 touchdowns, just like usual. That's what you're getting with him. He's not the most interesting pick. His ADP has him taken, I believe, 14th right now. So we have him ranked a bit higher than that, but not terribly higher. Again, not the most interesting pick, but definitely a solid pick right there around that 10 range.
Okay, so let's get to our next tier 2 guy, and that's going to be Kirk Cousins. And there's a lot of controversy here. I hope this is not a homer pick for me, being a Vikings fan. I hope I can look past my own bias and see it for what it is. Kirk Cousins' last 3 years, when he started, has averaged 27 touchdown passes per season with 4,392 passing yards per year. What's sneaky about his stats, though, is the last 3 years also had a total of 13 rushing touchdowns. A lot of people don't realize that that's kind of a sneaky number. You sneak that in there, and that helps quite a bit. I think for me, he comes from Washington to the Vikings. And it's good and bad. He comes to a defense, obviously, that's very good, so they're not going to throw the ball as much. But for me, I think he's got much better weapons than he had in Washington. You look at Diggs, Thielen, Rudolph, Dalvin Cook, who has great hands, and some of those other guys there. So I think he's got better weapons. I think this is the year he could easily break 30 touchdown passes. But the downside of that is the Vikings defense may not need him to do that. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins?
Well, exactly. Really, if you have 2 concerns for him, which, first of all, it gets to the good side. Dalvin Cook catching out of the backfield, a fairly solid tight end in Kyle Rudolph, probably top half the league for sure. Diggs and Thielen, great receiving core, great guys around him. Like you said, the defense is very good. Maybe one other possible concern is that that's actually a fairly solid run game. Through the first 4 games of the season, Dalvin Cook was 3rd in the NFL for combined yards. Of course, that includes receiving, but he was very effective in the running game. And Latavius Murray finished 4th in red zone carries with 48. He had 128 yards and 7 TDs in the red zone. So if anything, that's the concerns for him. But I think you put him right in the spot. Because of that defense, because of that running game, he's not going to really be any better than this. He can't be a tier 1 guy. But he is a good quarterback, and he's got really good people to throw to. So I don't really see any reason to put him any lower than where he is.
Yeah, he's not a sexy pick, but he's a safe pick, I think, at this point. A guy that's going to fall later on, you can take him and feel comfortable with him.
And I believe you said 13 touchdowns in the last 3 or 4 years?
That's 3 years, yeah.
Last 3 years. That's a little over 4 touchdowns a year in the running game. Cam Newton's going to get you about 5 or 6. That's surprisingly high up there. That shocks me a little bit. I wonder if the Vikings are going to allow him to continue to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got to think he's your franchise quarterback at this point. You probably want to protect him. So I think there's going to be a dip in that numbers, maybe 2 this year. But still, every stat matters. So.
And, well, that's the other thing. When you watch his film of those rushing touchdowns, they were never designed. It's not like the Vikings or the Redskins are going to be or have designed plays for him to run it in the end zone. It's just that things happen. When you have to cover Diggs, you have to cover Thielen, you have to cover Cook, you have to cover all those guys, Rudolph. You really can't cover the quarterback running, so maybe they don't fall down. But I like that pick, solid spot. Let's talk about Jared Goff now. I'm excited about Jared Goff this year. I think we may have him a little bit low. You have him a little bit low. I think these are more primarily your rankings. But why do you have him here where you have him?
Okay, so Jared Goff, former first overall pick, had a breakout year last year. He finished the quarterback rating 100.5. 28 touchdown passes and only 7 picks. He set out the last game. He probably would have had 2 touchdown passes there and ended up with 30, so he had a very good year there. He's surrounded with great weapons, undoubtedly. He's got Wood, Kupp, Cooks, Gurley. He's in a great system playing for a great offensive-minded quarterback coach in McVay. I think he's a little overhyped, and I'll tell you why in a second here, okay? There's some things I want to see from this guy before I'm convinced that this guy is a tier 1. No, I think he could definitely be there. He could definitely move that direction a little bit. No, he's been in the league 2 years. He's had 1 horrible year and he's had 1 great year. So which one is it? Here's my concerns. Last year, he's very, very predictable. If you watch our start set videos, the advice we gave him was all spot on from week to week. And here's what we noticed last year. Okay, he had huge games against bad pass defenses, but he struggled against solid pass defenses. Against the bad pass defenses, he really padded his stats. Okay, in 6 games last year, he totaled 17 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. In those games, he had a quarterback rating of 118, 146, 147, 125, 112, and 118 against these teams. Okay, it was against Indy, San Francisco, Giants, Houston, Philly, and Tennessee. 5 of those 6 teams finished in the bottom third in pass defense. Those defenses finished 30th, 25th, 32nd, and 17th in points allowed per game, and all 6 of them finished in the bottom half of the league in passing yards allowed per game. Whereas Goff was much less effective against top pass defenses. The Vikings shut him out, and that happened a number of times last year. The remaining 9 games that he played in, he had 11 touchdown passes to only 7 interceptions, which was solid numbers, but not great numbers per se. And so here's what I think about the guy. I think he definitely took a step forward. I think he's a very young, talented quarterback. Okay, I think he's very good, but I think he showed that he struggled against certain good defense. He's got some growing to do before I can consider this guy a tier 1 quarterback. That's my hesitation. So.
Okay. Well, I might put him a little bit higher, maybe above Cousins and Stafford, right next there, maybe above Cam Newton, right in that range, just slightly higher. It's important to note that we have him in the same tier. I mean, we're really ranking him in the same spot minus some minor details. Here's why I like him. His rookie year, he had 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Last year, he had 28 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So he almost multiplied his touchdowns 6 times while keeping the exact same amount of interceptions. If he is not a good quarterback, then that increase in volume should have increased in interceptions, and yet that didn't happen. I like his QBR over doubled. It went from 18.9 to 48.4. Of course, you mentioned his weapons. I don't necessarily know that he's going to go out and pass 30 touchdowns, but I like that 28 range. I like his weapons, and I do think he is a good quarterback. But again, I think we're just nitpicking to barely change things here.
Yeah, we're going to say this a lot, but he's a good quarterback that's going to get overhyped. He's going to be taken well before I'll ever take him, not because I'm against the guy, but I tend to wait on my quarterbacks and I load up on my other positions. So he's another guy I think that's going to be taken way too early. Not that I don't like him, not that he's not very talented, but All right, so let's get to Derek Carr.
Yeah.
So Derek Carr was a guy that I was huge on going to last year. He'd been training up the first 3 years of his career, and it looked like last year he was going to take that next step and become a tier 1 quarterback. But last year he took a step back. What happened? Well, I think it's real simple what happened last year. He suffered a back injury that set him back. But before his back injury, for the first 6 games, he had a quarterback rate of over 100 in that and a touchdown interception ratio of 11-4. And so he was looking really good before the injury. And so he was playing great. Also contributing to his struggles were the injury to his best weapon, Amari Cooper, who was hurt often played injured with ankle and shoulder injuries and some other things he dealt with. Carr's healthy, Cooper's healthy, and also they added Gruden. And Gruden's really done wonders for quarterbacks in the past. If we look at Brad Johnson, Rich Gannon, they were all pros during this time there. And I think it also helps that they added Jordy Nelson and Martavis Bryant. And so I think he gets back on track this year. I think he's going to have a very good year. He's poised for a nice rebound season.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I like about Derek Carr is the lack of running game. Last year, the Raiders ranked 25th in rushing. And you know what the Raiders say? Let's not improve the running game. Let's go out and get 2 wide receivers to help our quarterback. I think they're very committed to being a passing team and letting Derek Carr be really not just the heart of that offense, but the heart of that franchise. So I think that's all good news there for Derek Carr. But now we're going to move on. Our last guy in Tier 2. Basically, if you can't get this guy, then you're really dropping down in talent again, and that's Philip Rivers.
Yeah, Philip Rivers, he's a gunslinger. He reminds me a lot of Favre. I call him Favre-esque in our notes. If you watch Brett Favre, and I love Brett Favre, these guys throw it down the field, they chuck the ball up, they take chances, they make great plays, and they also break your heart at times. 5 times in his career, he's had over 30 touchdown passes. He hasn't missed a game in 12 seasons. He's extremely durable. He's not mobile at all, but it doesn't matter. You're not relying on that. Concerns I have for Philip Rivers and why, for me, he's kind of on the bubble. Almost Tier 3 at this point, is I think the Chargers are going to have a really good defense. A lot of those years, his stats were really padded by a porous Chargers defense. He had to play catch up a lot. That defense is very good, and I think it's going to lower his stats. I think it also hurts he lost Hunter Henry. But he's a guy that has a very solid floor, good but not great ceiling. What do you want to add to that?
I completely agree with you. I think it's all about the team that he's on. He loses Gates and Henry. He has a top-tier defense and an effective run game. I mean, that's really a formula for a game-managing quarterback to be playing there. And I have a feeling that's how the Chargers are going to use him this season. That could significantly limit his value. But like you said, and I didn't even know that, hasn't missed a game in 12 seasons. That's insane.
Yeah.
He's like Iron Man. But so that definitely bodes well for him. He's too good of a quarterback to drop too low. He hasn't had any concerns with how good he is, but it's just like, how much are they going to use him?
Yeah.
So we'll move on now. We can talk about our next tier. Do you want to?
Yeah, we're going to get to Tier 3 real quick. Before I do, I know some of you out there are losing your head because you got this crush on Jimmy Garoppolo. We're about to get to him. So Tier 3 is just guys with a few more question marks. Guys in Tier 3 will fall into, we're kind of getting to the realm of guys that you're probably not going to rely on week to week to be your starting quarterback. But in here, there'll be guys that'll be good plug-and plays if you have injuries or bye weeks, or a couple of sleepers that maybe the first couple of weeks you're not going to trust to be a starter, but maybe they'll come out and they do well like Jared Goff did last year, and they move into that realm of Tier 2. So we'll get into that a little bit there, who these guys are, but I know some of you are losing your head over Jimmy Garoppolo, but we'll get to him right now. You want to start talking about Jimmy Garoppolo a little bit, or do you want me to get going on that?
Well, you know what? I'll start. I just have 2 things to say on him. For me, it's really simple. First of all, his ADP of being the 9th quarterback taken it's bad. He shouldn't be that high. It's just bad. We have him ranked where we have him for a season here at number 15, or for a reason for this season here at number 15. And that just comes into his touchdown interception ratio last year. People got hyped on him because he came in and they started winning games. And I understand that he's a good quarterback, but we just talked about this a couple hours ago. He had 7 touchdowns in the first 6 games, which comes out to only 18 touchdowns over 16-game season. And you're going to put him in the top 10? No way. I'm sorry. He just doesn't have the weapons there. That's really all I got to say about him. To me, it seems very simple. He's a good quarterback, but he's going to need some more help around him, or he's going to need some time to get into that offense better before I can put him higher than where he is. I'm just going to sit back, let other teams take him too early, and I'll pick up one of those guys they're waiting on, like a Ben Roethlisberger, you know?
Yeah, you know, last year I like Jimmy Garoppolo. Honestly, I think he's going to be the franchise quarterback there for San Francisco for many years. I think you guys got. If you're a 49ers fan, I think you've secured your franchise quarterback and feel good about that. I also think he's going to break into Tier 2 next season. But right now, here are the concerns I have. Okay, so he comes from New England to San Francisco, and it takes him a while to learn the playbook and to gain rapport with the receivers. He did get better each game, and people got enamored with the 5 wins, which in football, that's what matters. Wins matters, but in fantasy, wins don't matter. It's all about the stats. Now, he does have a quarterback rating career-wise of 99.7, which is really good. He's shown he's got skills and poise to be a great NFL quarterback. The concerns, I need to see him over a longer period of time to be productive. All of his starts have been situational starts here and there, but I like to see now that this is his team for a prolonged period of time. But really, my biggest concern is not his talent or anything. It's the weapons around him. Pierre Garçon, Goodwin aren't awe-inspiring. I know they drafted a rookie Pettis or some other guys there, but there's a lot of question marks. The running game, I don't think they have a bona fide running game yet. They've got some running backs that are probably more wide receivers in the backfield than they are solid running backs. So I think that he's somebody who could have a breakout year. He's somebody to take a chance on. But right now his hype is soaring, so don't get burned by all the hype. Don't overpay for this guy. It's okay to like him, but don't reach for this guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's another guy there that you might pick up in a keeper league and stash as your secondary guy and then see how he develops, maybe play more at the end of the season or maybe keep him for next year. But for this year, he's just a little bit overhyped. So let's talk about Matt Ryan. I don't have a lot to say about Matt Ryan. I hope you do, but I'll just let you talk about him first.
So Matt Ryan, what to expect. Don't expect him to rebound to his 2016 MVP form, okay? Don't buy the hype. Now, going into last year, people were so jacked up on the guy. He's going early in the first round. People are loving Matt Ryan. And we went out and we came out publicly, and here's what we said, and this is from our preseason notes from last year. Here's my prediction. Last year was a bit of an aberration. It was the first time Matt had a quarterback rating of over 100, and only the second time made over 30 touchdown passes, which is somewhat concerning when you consider the weapons around him used to consist of Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, and Julio Jones. Besides last year, he's routinely underachieved. Also consider the fact that he lost offensive coordinator and quarterback guru Kyle Shanahan, who left for the 49ers. Don't be pressured to take him too early because of last year's bumper year. We nailed that. We were absolutely right on. Now, I do think he's going to have a better year than he had last year. I expect a little bit of a rebound to maybe the 23 to 25 touchdown range for him. So I think that he's not going to be a bad pick, but he's not going to be a stud. Many are going to remember his MVP year and get excited and take him too early. Don't overreach for him. Don't make that mistake. I would say he sits around a 12 to 18 quarterback range depending upon your scoring system rules, things like that. If he slips, grab him. He'll be a nice play, not a great play. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I have to add, I was going to talk about, it's really funny to think that he had Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, and Julio Jones and couldn't throw 30 touchdown passes. But on top of that, back in 2016 when he had his great year, that defense was actually bad. They were in the worst half of the league. They were like in the 20 to 30 range for as far as defenses goes. This year, they've made huge improvements, and I think that this year, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had a top 7, top 6, top 5 defense. They made huge improvements. I really like their defense going into this year, which is another reason to stay away. If they're limiting teams' points, then they're not going to need Matt Ryan to throw as much. They're not going to need him to do as much. And I know I repeat myself on that a lot, but I feel like I'm beating a dead horse a bit, but it's just so true. If a defense plays well, the quarterback doesn't have to. And that's that.
Yeah, I actually think we mentioned a video, a good stat, by the way. I forgot about it, but we did break it down that the year they had his MVP, I think they end up like 25th or 27th league in points allowed in defense. They were bad. And then last year they were 7th best in the NFL in points allowed, so they can certainly flip that around, and that matters a lot. So nice point.
Thank you. So now we'll talk about Eli Manning. A lot of people hate Eli Manning. Somebody was just commenting on one of our videos hoping that Eli Manning gets benched and they want to see what this other guy on the bench can do, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to get some hate for this, but I actually like Eli Manning this season. I don't think his struggles last year were his own, but I'll let you talk on him. What do you think about Eli Manning?
Yeah, so I look at Eli Manning. I think Eli Manning's had a good career. He's got 2 Super Bowls, so I'll give him all the credit for that. He's definitely not like his brother Peyton Manning, not even close. Now, at age 37, coming off a bad year, somebody you should consider using, I would say emphatically yes. We're going to get to why. I almost have a hard time saying this, but I kind of like Eli Manning this year. Last year he struggled. Most of his struggles are due to his whole wide receiver core went down for the year. It's like guys were being fallen left and right. In fact, like in one game, they lost 4 wide receivers. They had to lose Odell Beckham. Marshall was out for a while. Shepard was hurt for a while. Just injury after injury to his wide receivers. They had terrible offensive line play last year. They're getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback. The whole thing was a mess. Now, the Giants spent a lot of money in draft picks to improve the offensive line. Odell Beckham is healthy. They have Shepard, who's a very good number 2 wide receiver. Evan Ingram is a stud tight end. They drafted Barkley, who's got great hands. He's effective in the passing game. And that's actually going to improve the running game, which is going to take pressure off of that offensive line because now defenses can't just pin back their ears and come at the quarterback. I think another thing that helps around them is they have new head coach, Sherman. And Sherman has done wonders with all the quarterbacks he's worked with. Look what he did for Case Keenum. Look what he did for Sam Bradford and Nick Foles. Nick Foles, when Sherman was his offensive coordinator, had a touchdown to interception ratio that year. He ended up with 27 touchdown passes to only 2 picks. So I think that Eli Manning would be a nice late round steal or a matchup play. Once again, you look at where we have him. We certainly don't have him at the top. I wouldn't trust him first week or two to be my starter, but I definitely would take some shots with this guy. What's your take?
I completely agree with you. I love facts. I love you can't argue. I love this is true. I hate this is my opinion. And there are 2 things that we know for a fact about Eli Manning. Eli Manning has an insane plethora of unbelievable weapons, from Odell Beckham to Barkley coming in. He's being compared to LaDainian Tomlinson. Evan Ingram is last year had one of the best rookie tight end seasons ever. Sterling Shepard's a great number 2. So there's no arguing with his weapons. And then on top of that, last year they had the 27th worst defense ranked by points per game. They give up a lot of points. That defense isn't impressive. There are a lot of reasons to like Eli Manning, even if he isn't the most impressive quarterback on this list. As far as just true talent goes, he's got a lot of things going for him outside of that.
Okay. And so let's get to our last 2-3 guy, Tyrod Taylor. I'm not a big fan of Tyrod Taylor, but with his move from Buffalo to Cleveland, he's really got my attention. He's got great weapons around him. He really is. He's got Josh Gordon, Duke Johnson, who's a great receiving running back. Last year had 74 catches. He's got Corey Coleman, David Njoku at tight end, Jarvis Landry. So he's got talented hands to throw the ball to. That's the first time he's had these sort of weapons ever in his career. And so a lot of quarterbacks would be dying to be in his position at this point. He's also a very good running quarterback. Now, unfortunately, in his career, he has been marked with inconsistency. He's had some really huge games, then he'll just disappear. How much was that Tyrod Taylor? How much was Buffalo? It's hard to tell at this point. Worries I have, they drafted Baker Mayfield, although the coach has come out publicly and emphatically and said, Tyrod Taylor is our starting quarterback. Coach Haley said that, talking about Baker Mayfield, he's got a long way to go. I'd say it's clear that Tyrod is the leader of this team. And here's another thing that I'm thinking going into this year. Hugh Jackson, they've got to win some games if he's going to keep that job. I think they got to win at least 6 games, maybe 7 games for him to retain that job as coach. So I don't think he's going to be quick to rebuild with Mayfield and risk losses that could cost him his job. I think he's going to stick with Tyrod Taylor and try to win some games, but that's my take.
All right, I don't know if I have anything to add to that. I think you said it pretty accurate right there. He's a big matchup guy, play from week to week, but not a solid every week starter. I think that's all I got to say about him. Let's move on to our next tier.
Yeah, tier 4. These guys, honestly, these guys that you're not going to draft, these guys you're going to have to watch for sleepers. They have potential, or they're plug and plays if you have an injury or bye week, things like that. We're not going to get nearly as deep statistically, but if you want more information, go to our website. We'll have subsequent videos we'll dive into. But we're just going to do some quicker things. We're going to speed this up a bit here. Let's get to tier 4.
All right, so our first guy in tier 4 is Patrick Mahomes. Here's a few things I have to say about him. I like his tight end. Guys who are inexperienced at quarterback like to check down a lot to their running back and their tight end, and Kareem Hunt and Travis Kelce are good guys to check down to. I really like that Andy Reid has been comparing Patrick Mahomes to Brett Favre in his gunslinger big arm mentality. In fact, Andy Reid said he wasn't afraid of that and was fine with him throwing into the traffic and trying to make big plays. And so that could definitely bode well for Patrick Mahomes, who had a big game last year. He does have Tyreek Hill. People love Tyreek Hill. I think he's a little bit overrated. But all around, I don't think his receiving core is terrible. And if Andy Reid isn't lying, if Andy Reid is really going to let him throw the ball around like it sounds like, he definitely could move up this list fast. But he's so inexperienced, we really don't know what level of talent we're getting from Mahomes.
Yeah, so here's what I want to share with you. These are the notes that we had on Mahomes about a month or so ago. And then I'm going to give you an update, okay? Because like anything in fantasy football, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change as new information comes in. So here's kind of what we wrote a month or so ago. We said what to expect from Mahomes. Think of Watson's impact last year. The difference is Watson is a better running quarterback, but Mahomes was considered by many experts to be a better passing quarterback coming out of college. Many get enamored with Watson, but remember, Pat was drafted higher. First round, 10th overall, was ranked as a better quarterback heading into the draft. There's a reason why the Chiefs felt comfortable trading away Alex Smith after his Pro Bowl season. He has very good weapons around him with Kelsey, Hill, Hunt, and Watkins. Sky's the limit for this young quarterback. With that said, we did put this in there. There's a learning curve, especially for quarterbacks. He needs to prove it this season before we get too excited. Keep an eye on this guy. But then we updated, once again, got to be fluid here. On 6/27, we said reports early on that he is struggling, throwing picks and drills, fumbling some snaps. It's too early to chalk him up as a flop, but he is young, very talented. This reminds us that it takes time to develop into a good quarterback in the league. So that was kind of our update on what's going on there. So
I'm afraid he's one guy who has long-term talent, but everyone's going to reach for him. And I think that's just what's going to happen. But let's move on and talk about Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton is the epitome of meh. Just average in fantasy football. He averages about 25 touchdowns per 16 games, which is okay, but not great. His value is extremely tied to A.J. Green. In 2016, when A.J. Green missed 6 games, Andy Dalton only threw 18 touchdowns. I think that's all there really is to say. If he has A.J. Green, he's going to be average. If he doesn't have A.J. Green, he's going to stink.
Yeah, I'm not excited about Andy Dalton. He might be a plug-and-play for you. Maybe they got a new offensive coordinator that might help, because if you look at the Bengals, they've been the bottom third point scored the last few years. He has best year in 2015. He's a solid quarterback. He's not a great fantasy quarterback. Not a whole lot to say about him at this point. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what about Case Keenum? Case Keenum's a guy who had a great year last year, but otherwise throughout his career has struggled. He moves to a team with a good receiving core, but a bad offensive line and a phenomenal defense. What do we make of that? There's so much good news, bad news for him.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think Case Keenum is certainly going to be an upgrade over the quarterbacks they've had last couple of years in Denver. They had Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, some of those guys there. So I think he's definitely going to be an upgrade. I think that Denver defense is going to get back to dominant this year. They struggled last year. Some of their struggles was a bad offense. But they drafted Chubb, and you got Chubb and Miller on the line there. I mean, that defense could be very scary. Top 5, maybe even top 3. And if everything goes well, that defense could start to threaten, overtake Jacksonville. I feel that way about it. And so I like Case Keenum, but I'm not sure he's going to have to throw the ball as much as he would need to be considered like a viable fantasy option at this point. You look at takeaway last year, and for his career, minus last year, he had 24 touchdown passes to 20 picks.
All right, well, yeah, I think that about sums it up. And that's where I'm really just – this is why we say wait on quarterbacks. We haven't even talked about Mariota, Winston, Alex Smith, Sam Bradford. We haven't talked about Dak Prescott. We're about to. But we're really at a place where it's like I could see Case Keenum could break out and do what he did last year. Tyrod Taylor, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there are so many countless quarterbacks that it's not even a question of how talented is the quarterback. It's a question of how is things going to shake out this season? What's going to happen with the roster around him? That's what matters. There's so many talented guys, but so many guys who come just short.
Well, last year in a lot of leagues, 12-team leagues, plays like Carson Wentz wasn't drafted in many leagues. Neither was Alex Smith. They're trying to be a viable fantasy option. Watson wasn't drafted in a lot of leagues. That happens every year, though. That's not just last year. There's so many guys, and even the guys we're talking about here, that one or two of these guys are going to surprise us and bust out and have a good year. So you're right. Don't feel the need to get a quarterback. And if you have a bad week 1 or 2 quarterback-wise, somebody out there you can fit in your lineup. So.
All right, so now we'll talk about Dak Prescott. I like the Dak Prescott adds Allen Hurns. This is a guy who had 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2015, showed us he could really do it. His quarterback was Blake Bortles that year, which is an even better sign, on top of the fact that Allen Robinson basically did the same thing. He had 1,000 yards and over 10 touchdowns. I don't think there's a concern. I think with Allen Hurns' talent, he really adds to Dak Prescott. I like what you mentioned earlier. I won't steal from you about Elliott being able to add to Prescott's game.
Yeah, what do you think about Dak Prescott? As a rookie, this guy looked phenomenal. I like this kid. I think he's got all the skills to be a great NFL, to have a great NFL career. I think he needs weapons around him at this point. I like Allen Hurns, but I'm not sure I like Allen Hurns as a number 1 wide receiver. So last year, Dak owners saw a 20-point drop in his QBR, along with 1 less passing touchdown and less passing yards. That left a lot of owners disappointed in how he played. But I think and I think he's going to return back to his rookie form. If you look at the first 6 games last year, he looked great. Through his first 6 games, he had 14 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. He was on pace for 37 touchdown passes through that stretch, right? So I think he's got the skills. He's athletic, poise. He had a strong arm. He can run. So what happened down the stretch? If he started so well, what happened? Well, I think with Zeke out, play action was lost, and that offense wasn't nearly effective. I think that was the key why he was effective. Was that play action without Ezekiel Elliott there? Defenses, they didn't feel like the running game was a really threat to him at that point. He gets Ezekiel Elliott back for a full season. I think another thing that hurt last year is the offensive line was banged up quite a bit. And so now you add into that. Now, once again, I like Dak Prescott, but I think he needs more weapons. You got Witten is retired. Des Bryant is gone. His best wide receiver is Hearns. But I think Dak Prescott has sleeper appeal.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. That's a fairly solid assessment. It's one of those guys where, like I just said, he's got the talent. We just need to see something in the roster fill in to help him get to that next level. So what about Jameis Winston? Because of the suspension, we had to drop him down quite a bit. And I almost think that's good news. I'm almost happy about that because it's one of those guys where if you're desperate for a quarterback in week 4, 5, 6, Winston should be there for you to pick up as a fairly effective option. In fact, before that, we had him ranked a lot higher. But there are some serious concerns. I mean, one more thing and he could get banned from the NFL permanently, one more suspension or problem. But I don't imagine we have 2 suspensions in one season.
Yeah, I like Jameis Winston as far as an athlete goes. He improved his quarterback rate in the first 3 years. He's talented, he's young, but he's shown immaturity last year and some attitude issues. If he could get past these, I think he's got the gifts to be a top 10 quarterback. Now, he's suspended for 3 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy. He has tier 1 or 2 potential. But his off-the-field issues, and even last year, losing his temper and composure on the field are becoming very concerning and really bringing into question his future, not only with the team, but really in the NFL. If he can't fix this like many other talented players, I think this guy's going to burn out of the league. With that said, he's got a ton of talent. And so it's easy to just say, I'm going to stay away from this guy, but you do have to kind of keep an eye on him because of his potential. He's got a very low floor right now, but he's also got a very high ceiling. So anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that about sums it up. There's not a whole lot to say about these guys. We basically just said we're just waiting for other things to happen or waiting for the shoe to drop in his case, I suppose, or something. But great option later in the season. So what about Marcus Mariota? You asked me to look into Marcus Mariota. You didn't want to for whatever reason, but I was happy to do
this
it.
guy. This is a guy going into last year that some people thought he could break into the top 10. He looked like he was getting better and better, and last year had a really bad year. So what's going on? So what did you find out?
He's a product of a system, I'll say that. The Titans focus on the run game and they focus on their defense. He was vastly affected by their lack of wide receivers and aging tight end. In fact, even their run game struggled last year, but because they had an ineffective DeMarco Murray and they didn't want to use Derrick Henry because he wasn't good in the passing game. So I think the bringing in Dion Lewis is a phenomenal upgrade to their offense. He helps them catch the ball in the backfield, and I think he should help them run it better too. The new coordinator, Matt LaFleur, said, and everyone else has said, that he really is dedicated to helping Mariota's game. It's still a concern that he doesn't have good wideouts, and that absolutely needs to change. But before last year, he had a career quarterback rating of 93.55.
It's pretty solid.
That is pretty solid. He's just one of those guys, and I've said this a few times now, we're just waiting for a roster change. Give him a wide receiver, give him something to work with, or maybe one of those guys on that roster needs to step up. Whatever it may be, he just needs a little bit more help, a little bit better options to throw to, and he could get back to where he was easily.
Yeah, maybe Corey Davis develops. He's a first-round pick. Maybe he develops. Now, the other thing I saw today is that the coaches last year he played, he had that knee brace on. He's now shed that knee brace, and one of the coaches said he looks very fast this year. He's another guy that I wouldn't trust early on. I certainly wouldn't draft, but you definitely got to keep an eye on him. Would you say that he is another guy that has sleeper appeal?
Yes, he definitely does have sleeper appeal, especially with basically their top 3 wide receivers there have potential to be a sleeper wide receiver. Tajay Sharp, Tywan Taylor, and Corey Davis all could be guys that could surprise us as, kind of shockingly effective. So definitely sleeper appeal. Let's talk about our last guy in tier 4, and that's Alex Smith. Man, has he fallen down the rankings since switching teams, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's a guy that I feel bad for Alex Smith. I think he's a good NFL quarterback. I think he really is. I think he's underrated, in fact, but he's not a great fantasy quarterback because throughout his career, he's been really used as a game manager. And now he leaves Kansas City, which last year he was a very good fantasy option. But he goes to Washington, and he's working with worse weapons. So I think he's really a matchup play for me. So
we got to feel bad for the guy. He downgrades at wide receiver, downgrades at tight end, downgrades on the offensive line, even downgrades on the running game. I guess the only piece of news that is somewhat good is he's got Chris Thompson. If Chris Thompson is healthy, he receives well out of the backfield. But that's still kind of a crapshoot in that backfield. Not really sure what's happening there, that's for sure. It's not pretty. But that's our tier 4. We'll move on to, I guess, our final tier of so-called starting quarterbacks, or whatever you want to call it.
So let's get into Blake Bortles. He had one good season in terms of fantasy. 2015, he finished with 35 touchdown passes. But if you look back on that year, I think he was near the top of all quarterbacks in yards and touchdowns late in the fourth quarter. Many of his stats were during garbage times when defense were playing in soft zones or prevent defenses. So he really padded his stats that year. What we call garbage time stats.
I don't have a whole lot to say about him. Apart from 2015, Blake Bortles averages 18 passing touchdowns a year. That's who Blake Bortles is. He doesn't have great weapons. I mean, there's really not much more to say about this. This is one of these guys where there are a lot of sleeper potential guys, or a lot of guys who I think could be higher than they're ranked. Bortles is not one of them. I think this is about the highest we could put him, honestly.
Yeah, I would think that was the case, but there are actually a few people out there. We've been seeing our videos. By the way, we love your comments, likes, whatever. We even love when you disagree with us. And we've had a couple guys come out and say they're big on Blake Bortles this year. And what they're pointing to for why they think he's going to have a resurgent season was a 4-game stretch that he had at the end of last year. But I want to break down that 4-game stretch to tell you, don't get too caught up in that a little bit. Some of you out there think he's going to rebound because of that 4 games. So he had a 4-game stretch at the end of the year where he threw for 9 touchdown passes versus only 3 interceptions, right? And he averaged 325 passing yards during that stretch. That sounds impressive until you consider this. It was against Indy, who ranked 30th in points allowed on defense at 25.3 points per game, and 28th in yards, okay? It was against Seattle, and Seattle was kind of middle of the pack in terms of defensive statistics, but those stats were padded early in the season. When that defense played Jacksonville at the end of the year last year, okay, near the end of the year, Cam Chancellor and Sherman weren't even in that game. They missed that game, so that was a huge setback for that defense. They also did against Houston, who was last in the league on defense, allowing 27.3 points per game, and finally against San Francisco, who was 25th in points allowed per game. So those stats during that 4-game stretch are a bit deceiving. Don't get caught up in that. In fact, you watch our start sit videos all year long. We said stay away from Blake Bortles, but we actually in those matchups did say he's a guy that you could start as a matchup plug and play. I think that's what he is going to this year because I don't think he's overly talented. But when I look at Jacksonville, they're going to try to win by running the football and playing great defense. Mm-hmm. They don't want him to air the ball out a lot, so he's at best a plug and play for me. He's not a great quarterback.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. So now what about Sam Bradford? Sam Bradford, for me, I have him ranked really low. He's only healthy 70% of the time. You're not even sure if he's going to play, to be honest. They drafted Josh Rosen for a reason. I think they intend on playing him this season. The Arizona Cardinals, they're not even in playoff contention, let alone Super Bowl contention. They're rebuilding mode. Despite the fact that they have David Johnson, they are definitely in rebuilding mode. And a concern for Bradford is how well Josh Rosen has impressed people. Cornerback Patrick Peterson said this: Josh blew my mind the first week I played with him. Just to see him run the hurry-up offense so effectively, to see him make all the different checks and changes to the offense, to see him put guys in positions, I was completely stunned when I saw how he was. So he's definitely impressing. I just think it's one of those guys who's a matter of time till he's on the bench. In fact, if I'm Arizona, why would you have brought Sam Bradford in? Honestly, I think they brought him in to be a coach to their young quarterback.
To mentor him, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not much to say about Sam Bradford. He's proficient quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, can't stay healthy. So let's talk about Ryan Tannehill. So last year he was injured, out for the year. And the year before his injury, he actually was trending upwards. It looked like he kind of had made some progress, missing the entire season. Now he lost Landry, doesn't have his best wide receiver at this point on paper would be Parker, who's far from proven. He's really underachieved. I think Ryan Tannehill's a guy that we're just going to have to watch weeks 1, 2, and 3, see how he does. I think he's another guy that's maybe a matchup plug and play. I'm not real excited about him.
Yeah, exactly. He was a guy I used to like when he came into the NFL. And for about 1 year, he threw over 4,000 yards. He looked like, he might emerge. And then like a lot of other quarterbacks, this just seems to be the way the NFL is. Things kind of fell apart for him, and he just doesn't have the weapons.
Yeah,
that's about it.
So let's get to Mitch Trubisky. I know a lot of people look at Jared Goff and they see the leap that he made from year 1 to year 2, and they're anticipating this could happen for Mitch Trubisky. I don't see that happening this year, and I don't see it happening for him. But I think he made some good strides. We look at Goff, but Goff had a better system. He had a better coach in terms of like somebody who's a quarterback guru, and I think the weapons around him are just better. I don't see Mitch Trubisky making that leap this year. But what are your take on him?
I completely agree. First of all, he's in a tough division. He's going to play Minnesota twice. He's going to play Green Bay twice, who made some improvements to their defensive backs, which helps a little bit. And then he even has to play Detroit twice, who their number one corner, Slay, has been very good over the last couple of years. It's just a tough division to play in. He hasn't wowed me. He doesn't have great weapons. I'm not a big fan, to be honest. Somebody was mad at us last year for not liking him, and somebody will be mad at us this year, but nothing to me says he's a good fantasy option.
Yeah, sorry, Bears fans. So let's get to Joe Flacco. I think he's been overrated for years. Joe Flacco's reputation got built up. This guy was phenomenal in the postseason. He played great, but during the regular season, especially when we look at fantasy football, just hasn't been that good, honestly. I think the Ravens' strength is their defense, and they drafted Jackson as the heir apparent to Flacco. Flacco, I think it took him till like week 13 last year, maybe even later in the year, before he had more touchdown passes than interceptions. Anything you want to add to Flacco? I know for years you were kind of a Ravens fan there.
Yeah, it's bad. He hasn't played well. Poor John Harbaugh. I think that they drafted Lamar Jackson to come in and be the man, and I hope that can be the case. Their defense is good. With Alex Collins, their running game is good, though they do have a pretty messed up wide receiver situation. They brought in Brown, Crabtree, and tight end Hayden Hurst, so that may turn things around, but I think that it's going to be Lamar Jackson's team. Honestly, I do, and I know that's a stretch. I hate to just assume that a rookie quarterback is going to take the job, but I really think that's the case. They drafted him specifically because Flacco's been bad. So what about Josh McCown now?
Yeah, that's another one. Josh, he's not young anymore. He's getting up there in age. I know they want to look at the future, but right now you look at the quarterback that they drafted. They've got a couple guys there, Sam Darnold, right? Mm-hmm. And some other guys that probably haven't emerged. That's just not a pretty situation for me. I don't care who you're looking at, whether it's rookie quarterback or Josh McCown. He's a guy that might emerge last year. He had some plug-and-play value. He might be there again. We just need to see how this develops as it gets closer to the beginning of the season. But even if they announce that he's the starter at this point, to me that doesn't change where I see him, which is nothing more than a plug-and-play, honestly.
Yeah, McCown was a good was kind of a good plug-and-play last year. But when they bring in Bridgewater and they bring in Sam Darnold, it's evident that they're just not happy with his performance and they're looking to replace him. Seems pretty simple to me.
Yeah.
So now we'll move on. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can move on now. We'll talk about our other guys. These are just a few other names to mention here and there. They're so far down the list, they're not even in the top 32 guys, which tells us you're not going to draft them. You're going to wait and see what happens, but we'll just talk about them and I guess maybe give you a little bit of a vague idea and maybe a slight prediction on what we might expect to have happen, but we'll go to that slide now. All right, so I just did a little talking about Lamar Jackson. I think that he definitely could move into that starting role. I talked earlier about Cam Newton's 14 rushing touchdowns his rookie year, RG3. Plenty of rushing quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson can have good rookie seasons. Of all the rookie quarterbacks, I think you agree with me, this is the guy, if you had to start a rookie quarterback, that you would have to start.
Yeah, we did a video right after the NFL draft took place. So we took the NFL draft, said how does that impact fantasy football. You should watch that video. And in there we break down why it's not good to trust rookie quarterbacks in fantasy. They just statistically don't do very well. Even the greatest quarterbacks haven't had good rookie seasons. There has been a few exceptions, and those exceptions of guys who came in as rookie quarterbacks and had a good year, that had fantasy value, all 5 of them were quarterbacks that can run the ball. Lamar Jackson, of all the quarterbacks right now that were drafted, is by far the best. He came out of college. I think he had over 4,000 rushing yards. I think he had a total like 50 rushing TDs. Phenomenal. Don't quote me on those stats, but they were very, very impressive. This guy could come in and have an immediate impact because of his athleticism. So he's definitely a guy you have to watch.
As I talked about Sam Bradford earlier, Josh Rosen, the second guy in that list that I would think for rookie quarterbacks that could come in and have an impact possibly is going to be Josh Rosen. It's going to take him a while to get used to the NFL. It's going to take him a while to get used to his receivers. I think Christian Kirk is actually a pretty good draft pick. I like him. Fitzgerald's not bad. Ricky Seals-Jones. He doesn't actually have the worst receiving core, but it's far from impressive, although David Johnson out of the backfield helps. He's a guy I may, if I'm desperate, start late in the season. but probably not even then. I think this is definitely going to be a watch and wait year just to see what he can do.
Yeah, you look at some of the guys out there. Josh Allen, you mentioned him a little bit. Reports coming out of the camp, they were impressive with arm strength, but for me, that's not that impressive. A lot of these guys coming into the NFL, especially first-round picks, they do have strong arms. A lot of them do. There's a big difference between having the physical ability and being able to make the reads and understand, adjust to the game. He's got a long way to go at this point. They're saying he works hard, but the other concern I have for it is Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't have great weapons there, and so once again, that's just something I would stay away from. Sam Darnold is another one that there's a lot of competition there at this point. They're saying they're giving a 50-50 chance win that job outright in camp. But even if he does, once again, I'm just not sure that I would trust him. There's also been talk that he actually might start the year on the inactive list. Mm-hmm. And so that's concerning. So one group is saying, no, this guy's looking good. He's working hard. He might even be the starter. Another group saying this guy might even be inactive at the start of the season. So just stay away from Sam Darnold unless things drastically change there. Baker Mayfield, we talked about him. Unless you want to touch more on him there.
I think it's simple. Tyrod Taylor is too good of a quarterback for Baker Mayfield to come out this season and be an effective rookie quarterback. That's it.
Yeah. Now, this guy's not a rookie, but he's on my notes here. Nick Foles. Now, he's a guy you have to keep an eye on, but it sounds like Wentz is looking good. I would be interested if all of a sudden he gets traded to another competitor, maybe later on. That's somebody to keep an eye on. Who are some of the other guys out there? I think about A.J. McCarron. Somebody thought maybe he had a shot. Right now, A.J. McCarron's not looking good at all. They're very disappointed with his progress. We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for quarterbacks. Now, if you go to our site, we will update some of this information, some statistics, trends, whatever it is regarding these guys. Is there anybody else out there you want to talk about as far as quarterbacks left?
No, not really. I like what you said about Nick Foles. If he goes somewhere, he could definitely break out. But there are so many guys in the top 20 that you should not be even looking at the guys that we're talking about, other than because you're obsessed with fantasy football and you just love to watch and follow guys. Honestly, these guys shouldn't even be on your roster, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, if you're dependent upon one of these guys to win, I can tell you right now you ain't winning your fantasy league. That's the bottom line. You're probably already done if you're that desperate. So, anything you want to add there?
No, I got nothing to add. Of course, we're going to do a quarterback adjustment rankings video as we get closer to the season. We don't want to do an entirely new rankings, but we'll keep you guys up to date. Of course, we'll update our rankings on our website, so make sure to check that out. And I think that's about it, unless you have something else to say.
No, that's it. Once again, we love you guys. Love the feedback. So anyways, like, share, get your friends subscribe, help us continue to build the site. We appreciate so much. God bless and take care.